The human child sat in the back row of the Galactic Council's observation deck, still as stone, while every predator species in the room tracked her with their eyes. Queen Shirvara of the Thes noticed this within the first 60 seconds of entering the chamber. The girl was maybe 12 rotations old by human standards. Blonde hair pulled into a functional knot. Clothes that had been clean once. Her hands rested flat on her thighs, fingers spread wide like she was grounding herself to the floor through sheer will. She didn't fidget. Didn't look around. Her gaze stayed fixed on the middle distance, watching everything without seeming to watch anything at all. Shirvara had ruled the Thes dominion for 40 cycles. She knew prey behavior. This wasn't it. The diplomatic assembly had gathered to discuss trade routes through the Kepler arm, a routine matter that required representatives from 23 species. The observation deck held family members, apprentices, and low-ranking officials who couldn't fit in the main hall. They sat on benches arranged in ascending rows, a small crowd of perhaps 60 individuals representing a dozen different species. The predator delegates sat scattered among them. A Kresh warrior, scaled and massive, his ridged plates gleaming under the soft lights. 2 Vorten hunters, lean and quick, with eyes that caught every movement. A Drow enforcer, all muscle and chemical aggression, mandibles clicking with impatience. All of them watched the human child. Not constantly. Not obviously. But their attention returned to her again and again, the way a compass needle finds north. The Kresh shifted his position twice to maintain line of sight. The Vortens took turns glancing back. The Drow's antennae stayed oriented toward her even when his head faced forward. Shirvara settled into her own seat in the front row, her guard Captain Vel standing at her right shoulder. She didn't need to turn around to verify what she'd seen. The back of her neck prickled with the awareness that something was wrong, the same instinct that had kept her alive through 3 assassination attempts and 2 coups. "The child," she said quietly, her voice carrying only to Vel. "Human. Registered as dependent of Ambassador Chen. Background cleared." Vel's response was immediate, professional. He'd already checked. "They're watching her." Vel didn't ask who. He knew. Confirmed. "Pattern suggests threat assessment rather than curiosity." The council proceedings began with the usual formalities. Trade representative from the Korth Collective outlined proposed route modifications. The hegemony delegate countered with security concerns. Voices rose and fell in the practiced rhythm of diplomacy, words measured and formal, positions stated and defended. Shirvara heard none of it. The human child's stillness was absolute. She barely seemed to breathe. Her eyes moved in tiny increments, tracking movements throughout the room with a precision that spoke of training or trauma or both. When a delegate rose to speak, the girl's gaze followed them. When someone approached the refreshment table at the side of the room, she noted it. She was mapping the space, cataloging threats, calculating distances and exits. Children didn't do this naturally. Prey animals did this when they knew predators were close. The Kresh warrior stood abruptly, his motion sudden enough to draw attention from several delegates. He moved toward the exit, his path taking him past the back row. Past the human child. She didn't flinch. Didn't turn her head. But her fingers pressed harder against her thighs, knuckles widening with the pressure. The Kresh paused. Just for a moment. His head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. Then, he continued walking, disappearing through the archway into the corridor beyond. Shirvara's secondary heart began to beat faster, the Thes biological response to danger. Something was building in this room. Something that existed beneath the surface of diplomatic words and official protocols. One of the Vortens left next. Different exit, same deliberate path past the child. Same pause. Same continuation. The pattern was unmistakable now. Vel leaned down, his voice barely a whisper. "Your Majesty. We should relocate." "No." Shirvara kept her eyes forward, her posture relaxed and regal. Queens didn't flee from implied threats. "But alert your second. Have them trace those departures. I want to know where they're going." She felt rather than saw Vel's acknowledgement, the slight shift of weight that meant he was activating his communication device through his neural interface. The council session continued. A delegate from the Merchant Guild proposed a compromise on tariff structures. Another suggested a subcommittee to study environmental impacts. The human child remained motionless in the back row. The Drow enforcer rose from his seat. This time Shivara turned her head, breaking protocol to watch directly. The Drow moved with purpose, his trajectory obvious. He wasn't heading for an exit. He was walking straight toward the back row, toward the human child who sat silent and still while death approached on chitinous legs. The girl's eyes moved. Just slightly. Just enough. She saw him coming. And she didn't run. The Drow's mandibles spread wide, a gesture of aggressive intent among his species. Several nearby delegates noticed now, conversations faltering as attention shifted to the unfolding scene. The human child remained seated, her hands still flat against her thighs, her breathing shallow and controlled. Shivara stood. The entire room went silent. "This assembly," she said quietly, "will take a brief recess." The human child's breathing stopped completely. Just for 3 heartbeats. Then, resumed careful and measured. She knew what was happening. She understood that attention had shifted, that the predator approaching her had been interrupted by something more dangerous than himself. She understood that the Queen of the Thess Dominion had just intervened. And she still hadn't moved. The Drow enforcer froze mid-step. Protocol demanded he acknowledge the Queen's authority. Biology demanded he complete his approach to the target his instincts had marked. For a moment he stood suspended between competing imperatives, his bulk swaying slightly as chemical processors in his brain warred with civilized training. Vel moved. Not dramatically. Not threateningly. He simply positioned himself between the Drow and the back row, his hand resting on his sidearm with professional casualness. The message was clear without words being spoken. The Drow's mandibles clicked shut. He bowed, shallow and perfunctory, then turned and left through the nearest exit. The observation deck erupted in quiet chaos. Delegates murmured to their aides. Officials conferred in worried clusters. The carefully maintained atmosphere of civilized diplomacy had cracked, revealing something primitive and violent underneath. The human child sat in the back row, still silent, still motionless. But now she was looking directly at Shivara. Their eyes met across the room, across the gulf between species and status and age. The girl's expression revealed nothing. No fear, no gratitude, no question. Just acknowledgement. One survivor recognizing another. Shivara had seen that look before. In mirrors. In the eyes of soldiers who'd held positions against impossible odds. In the faces of those who'd learned that survival meant watching everything, trusting nothing, and never, ever showing weakness. The girl was 12 years old. And she had the eyes of someone who'd already learned to hunt. Vel's voice came through her neural interface, bypassing spoken words. Your Majesty. My second reports all 3 predators are converging on the North Service Corridor. They're coordinating. Shivara kept her expression neutral, her posture relaxed. She addressed the room with calm authority. This assembly will adjourn to the lower conference chamber. All observers are to remain in this location until security has cleared the building. This is not a request. She moved toward the back row. Toward the human child who sat silent, while the room emptied around her, delegates and officials filing out under Vel's direction, guards appearing at doorways to ensure compliance with the Queen's order. The girl watched her approach. Still didn't move. But something changed in her eyes. Recognition shifted to calculation. She was measuring distances again. Assessing threats. Preparing for violence that might come from any direction. Your name, Shivara said quietly, standing 3 paces away. Maya Chin, Your Majesty. The girl's voice was steady. Practiced. The kind of steadiness that came from repeating things until emotion couldn't break through. Your parents? Ambassador Chin is my father. My mother died 4 years ago. Where is your father now? The main chamber. He's Deputy Trade Representative for Earth. Shirvara considered this. An ambassador's child, alone in the observation deck, serving as bait for something the predators wanted badly enough to break every rule of civilized conduct. The mathematics of the situation shifted in her mind, political calculations mixing with tactical assessments. You knew they were watching you, she said. Yes, Your Majesty. You didn't call for help. No, Your Majesty. Why? The girl's expression flickered. Just for a moment. Something raw and honest broke through the careful mask, then vanished again behind trained composure. Because calling for help would have made them move faster. And I needed to know how many there were. Shirvara felt her secondary heart accelerate. The girl wasn't bait. She was hunting. How many? 5, Maya said immediately. The 3 who left, plus 2 more who stayed in the main chamber. They're using a pack formation. The ones here were supposed to flush me toward the ones waiting outside. You're certain? I'm alive, Your Majesty. That requires certainty. The observation deck stood empty now except for Shirvara, Vel, 2 additional guards, and the human child who spoke like a soldier 3 times her age. Through the doorway, Shirvara could hear the muffled sounds of the council assembly relocating to secure chambers, voices raised in concern and confusion. Maya stood finally, her movements economical and controlled. She was small for a human, Shirvara realized. Malnourished maybe, or just naturally slight. The kind of build that made predators think easy prey. The kind of mistake that could be fatal. The creche smelled something on you, Shirvara said, testing. What was it? Maya's hand moved to her jacket pocket. Slowly, keeping the motion visible. She pulled out a small container, maybe 4 centimeters across, made of human plasteel. Pheromone marker. Creche use it to identify targets for coordinated hunts. Someone put it on my clothes 3 days ago. I couldn't wash it out without them knowing I was aware. So you became bait. So I made them think I was bait. Maya's voice remained steady. There's a difference, Your Majesty. Vel spoke for the first time, his professional calm cracking slightly. You're a child. Yes. Maya met his eyes without flinching. Children make excellent targets. We're small, weak, easy to isolate. We trigger protective instincts in potential witnesses, which means predators have to be more careful. We're emotionally vulnerable, which makes us easier to manipulate. And when we disappear, people assume we got lost or ran away, not that we were hunted. The clinical way she recited these facts made Shirvara's skin prickle beneath her scales. This wasn't theory. This was experience. How long have they been hunting you? This group? 4 weeks. Others before them? Since my mother died. The math clicked into place. 4 years of this. 4 years of being tracked, assessed, marked as prey by every predator species that saw a vulnerable human child and thought opportunity. 4 years of learning to sit still, to watch, to calculate, to survive through awareness and control when size and strength offered no protection. 4 years of being 12 years old and learning to hunt back. Vel's voice came through the neural interface again. Your Majesty. The predators are not in the North Corridor. They've disappeared. Shirvara felt the situation shift, danger crystallizing from potential to immediate. She'd been outmaneuvered. The Drow hadn't been approaching Maya to attack. He'd been checking if the Queen would intervene. Testing her commitment. Confirming that Maya was valuable enough to warrant protection. Which meant the real attack wasn't coming for the child. It was coming for anyone who tried to protect her. Vel, she said aloud, her voice sharp with command. Full defensive formation. They're here. The lights went out. Emergency illumination flickered on 3 seconds later, bathing the observation deck in dim red light that turned everything into shadows and shapes. Shirvara's vision adapted quickly, her Thess biology optimized for low-light hunting. She saw Vel moving to her left, saw the two guards positioning themselves at doorways, saw Maya dropping into a crouch that put her below the sight line of the bench backs. Smart girl. Using terrain for cover. Something moved in the darkness beyond the doorway. Fast. Too fast for civilized species. Predator fast. The first guard went down without sound, pulled into the corridor by hands Shirvara couldn't quite see. The second guard raised his weapon, targeting protocols engaging, finger tightening on the trigger. He never fired. The Kresh warrior came through the doorway like an avalanche, all mass and momentum and precise violence. His claws caught the guard's throat, a surgical strike that severed arteries and crushed vertebrae simultaneously. The guard fell, weapon clattering across the floor. Vel's sidearm came up smooth and professional. He fired twice, center mass, shots that would have dropped most species instantly. The Kresh staggered, armor plating absorbing the worst of the impact, then kept coming. Shirvara moved. Not away. Toward. Queens didn't run from danger. They ended it. Her claws extended, ceremonial sheaths falling away to reveal the weapons her species had carried for 1,000,000 years before discovering civilization. She was smaller than the Kresh, lighter, less armored. She was also faster, and she'd killed before. They met in the space between the benches, predator and predator, royal and warrior. His claws swept toward her throat. She ducked under, twisted, drove her own claws into the gap between his armor plates where scales met flesh. Hot blood sprayed across her hands, across the floor, across the benches where moments ago diplomats had sat discussing trade routes. The Kresh roared, the sound massive in the enclosed space. His backhand caught her ribs, sent her stumbling sideways into a bench. Pain exploded through her chest, sharp and immediate. Cracked ribs, maybe. Possibly broken. She kept moving anyway, training overriding pain, survival instinct stronger than injury. Vel was there, weapon firing again, shots carefully placed to miss Shirvara while targeting the Kresh's joints and sensory organs. One shot took the warrior in the left eye. He screamed, clawed at his face, turned toward this new threat. Maya moved. Shirvara saw it in her peripheral vision, the human child flowing from cover with something in her hand. Something small and metallic that caught the red emergency lights as it flew through the air with precision that spoke of practice, of training, of necessity. The object hit the Kresh in the throat, right where Shirvara's claws had opened his armor. It stuck there, embedded in flesh and scale and blood. Then, it exploded. Not with fire. With sound. A compression charge designed to generate a focused shockwave, the kind of weapon humans use for industrial purposes, for breaking rock and clearing debris. In an enclosed space, against exposed flesh, it was devastating. The Kresh warrior's roar became a wet gurgle. His legs folded. He crashed to the ground, blood pooling beneath his massive body, life leaving him in shuddering gasps. The observation deck went silent except for harsh breathing and the drip of blood hitting the floor. "Two more," Maya said quietly from her position behind the bench. Her voice remained steady, unchanged, like she just commented on the weather instead of killing something that weighed 3 times her body mass. "The Vordans are flanking from the eastern corridor. The Drow's position is uncertain." Shirvara stared at the human child who crouched in shadows with blood spatter on her clothes and death in her hands. 12 years old? Armed with improvised weapons. Speaking tactical assessments with cold precision. "You planned this," she said. "No, Your Majesty." Maya stood slowly, keeping low, still using cover. "I prepared for this. There's a difference." Vel moved to Shirvara's side, his training overriding the shock she could see in his eyes. "Your Majesty, you're injured. We need to extract you too." "No." Shirvara straightened despite the pain in her ribs, despite the blood on her hands, despite every instinct screaming at her to seek safety. "The child's assessment is correct. 2 more predators remain active. If we move, they'll have clear shots in the corridors. We hold this position." She looked at Maya, at the girl who'd sat silent in the back row while predators circled. "What weapons do you have?" Maya's hand went to her jacket. She pulled out 2 more compression charges, smaller than the first. A folding knife with a ceramic blade. And something else, something that looked like a human communications device but had been modified with components Shivara didn't recognize. Signal jammer, Maya said, noting where Shivara's eyes went. Disrupts neural interfaces and coordination software. Range is about 15 meters. It's why the lights went out. Hit their control systems too. You caused the blackout. I needed them to commit. To come into a space where I had terrain advantage and they couldn't coordinate effectively. Maya's expression remained calm, analytical. Predators hunt in packs because coordination makes them stronger. Remove coordination, and they're just 5 individuals who don't trust each other. Shivara felt something shift in her understanding of the situation. The human child hadn't been bait. She'd been the trap. The predators thought they were hunting her, but she'd been hunting them all along, waiting for them to gather, waiting for them to commit, waiting for exactly the right moment to strip away every advantage they thought they had. You used me, Shivara said quietly. Maya met her eyes, and for the first time something like regret crossed her face. I used your presence, Your Majesty. When you intervened, you confirmed you were a valid threat to their pack structure. They had to eliminate you to get to me. That forced them to commit to this location, at this time, with these numbers. And if I hadn't intervened? Then they would have taken me in the corridors, and I'd be dead. But you did intervene. Queens protect their people. That's what makes you queens. The sound of movement came from the eastern corridor, exactly as Maya had predicted. Vel raised his weapon, covering the approach. Shivara moved despite her broken ribs, positioning herself between the doorway and the human child, instinct overriding tactical thinking. Maya pulled her back. Small hands, surprisingly strong, tugging Shivara behind the bench that offered the best cover angle. Your Majesty, please. I need you alive and functional. This doesn't work if you die being noble. 2 shapes appeared in the doorway. Vorten hunters, lean and quick, moving with the coordinated precision of a bonded pair. They saw Vel immediately, saw his weapon tracking toward them. They split, one diving left, one right, using the benches for cover, moving too fast for standard targeting protocols. Maya threw the signal jammer. It bounced once, twice, came to rest in the center of the room between the diving Vortens. Then, it activated with a pulse of electromagnetic energy that Shivara felt as pressure against her temples, a brief spike of interference that made her neural implants flicker and reset. The Vortens stumbled, coordination breaking, their shared tactical network disrupted. They recovered quickly, they were professionals, but quickly wasn't fast enough. Vel fired. Precise shots, placed with professional calm, targeting legs and weapons instead of center mass. Disable, don't kill. The first Vorten went down hard, femur shattered, weapons spinning across the floor. The second managed to get his own weapon up, return fire, energy bolts searing through the air. One hit Vel's shoulder. His armor absorbed most of the impact, but he grunted with pain, his aim wavering for a critical second. The Vorten pressed his advantage, moving forward, weapon tracking toward Vel's head. Death was 3 seconds away, maybe less. Shivara couldn't reach him in time. Vel couldn't recover his aim fast enough. Maya moved like liquid shadow, crossing the space between benches with speed that seemed impossible for human physiology. She had the folding knife in her hand, ceramic blade catching red emergency light. She didn't go for the Vorten's weapon. Didn't try to match strength against strength. She went for his legs, blade driving into the back of his knee, severing tendons with anatomical precision. The Vorten collapsed, weapon firing wild, bolts hitting ceiling and walls. Maya rolled away, already moving, already clearing the kill zone before he could reorient. Vel shot him in the head. Professional. Efficient. Final. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. 2 Vortens down. 1 Kresh dead. 3 of 5 predators neutralized. The drow, Shivara said. Her voice came out rougher than intended, pain from her ribs, making breathing difficult. Where? Still uncertain? Maya was checking the Vortons, making sure they were actually incapacitated, movements quick and clinical. He should have attacked with the others. Pack tactics demand overwhelming force. The fact that he held back means. The wall exploded. Not the doorway. Not an entrance. The actual wall, reinforced polymer and structural support, torn open by Drow's strength enhanced with chemical augmentation. The enforcer came through in a spray of debris and dust, mandibles spread wide, claws extended, compound eyes reflecting red emergency light like a demon from human mythology. He was 3 times larger than he'd been in the chamber before. Chemical injectors visible along his carapace, pumping combat drugs that turned Drow enforcers into living weapons. Armor plating covered his thorax. Military-grade energy shield flickered around his body, the kind of technology that was illegal in civilian spaces. This wasn't hunting. This was war. The Drow's gaze swept the room, assessing threats, calculating targets. He saw the dead Kresh, the disabled Vortons. Saw Vel reloading his weapon, saw Shervara standing despite her injuries. Saw Maya Chin, small and human and fragile, standing in the center of the carnage. He charged at the girl. Vel fired. Every shot in his weapon, full automatic, energy bolts hammering into the Drow's shield in a continuous stream of violence that lit the observation deck like lightning. The shield held. Barely. Flickering with each impact, power cells straining, but holding. Shervara ran despite her broken ribs, despite every scrap of royal dignity and protocol, ran straight at the charging Drow with her claws extended and murder in her heart. She was a queen. She'd sworn oaths. She protected those under her authority, and this human child had stood alone against predators for 4 years while the galaxy's civilization failed her. Not anymore. She hit the Drow from the side, claws seeking gaps in his armor, going for joints and seams and anywhere that biology created weakness. Her claws skittered off reinforced chitin, scraped across energy shielding, found purchase in the flexible material between plates. She drove deeper, felt resistance, felt something vital rupture beneath her hand. The Drow's backhand caught her across the face. The world exploded into stars and darkness. She felt herself flying, felt impact against something hard, felt consciousness trying to slip away. She held on through sheer will. Through training. Through the same instinct that made Maya sit still while predators circled. Through the knowledge that if she fell now, the child would die. Her vision cleared. She was on the ground, blood in her mouth, broken ribs screaming with every breath. The Drow was still standing, still moving toward Maya, shield flickering but functional, Shervara's attack having done damage but not enough. Maya stood her ground. She held her last compression charge in one hand, the folding knife in the other. 12 years old? Armed with improvised weapons. Facing something that weighed 400 kilograms and had been chemically altered into a killing machine. She didn't run. The Drow reached for her, claws opening wide enough to close around her entire torso. Maya threw the compression charge. Not at the Drow. At the ground between his legs. At the puddle of Kresh blood that had pooled across the floor. The charge detonated. The shockwave caught the Drow's legs, but more importantly it caught the blood. Liquid became spray, became a fine mist that filled the air around the Drow's head, that coated his compound eyes, that blocked his vision for a critical second. Maya moved. She dove between his legs, came up behind him, blade already moving. She couldn't pierce his armor. Couldn't match his strength. So she went for his chemical injectors, the tubes that fed combat drugs into his system, the technology that made him a weapon. Her knife found one. Severed it. Augmented chemicals sprayed across the floor, wasted, no longer reaching his system. The Drow roared, spun, tried to grab her. She rolled away, came up running, already moving toward where Vel had fallen, where his weapon lay discarded. The Drow's movement stuttered. Chemical balance disrupted. Augmentation failing. He was still dangerous, still massive, still armored. But he was slowing, strength beginning to fail as his enhanced physiology crashed without steady drug infusion. Vel rose from where he'd fallen. Blood covered his shoulder, his armor scorched and cracked. He picked up his weapon with his off hand, aim shaky but determined. He fired once. Twice. 3 times. Each shot hit the flickering energy shield, each impact draining power cells that were already failing. The shield collapsed. Shervara forced herself to stand. Every movement was agony, broken ribs grinding together, but she stood anyway. She was a queen. Queens didn't stay down. She walked toward the drow, each step measured, each movement controlled. He saw her coming. Tried to raise his arms to defend. His enhanced system betrayed him, muscles twitching erratically, chemical balance destroyed. Shervara's claws found his throat. Not a wild strike. Not a desperate attack. A precise, professional execution. She drove deep, found the critical vessels, tore them open. The drow's roar became a gurgle. He fell, massive body hitting the floor hard enough to shake the room. 5 predators. All down. All dead or disabled. The observation deck fell into silence broken only by harsh breathing and the wet sounds of dying things. Red emergency light painted everything in blood tones, turned the space into a scene from Nightmare. Bodies lay scattered across the floor. Benches were overturned, walls torn open, the careful civility of diplomatic spaces replaced by raw violence. Maya Chin stood in the center of it all, small and human and 12 years old, with blood on her hands and emptiness in her eyes. Shervara limped toward her, each step sending fresh waves of pain through broken ribs. She reached the girl, stood looking down at this child who'd learned to hunt predators the way other children learned to read. "You knew they'd try to kill me," Shervara said quietly. "When they realized I was protecting you. You knew and you used it anyway." "Yes, Your Majesty." Maya's voice carried no apology. No regret. Just fact. They needed a threat significant enough to force commitment. You provided that threat. I'm sorry. Don't be. Shervara reached out, placed one bloody hand on Maya's shoulder. You did what you had to do to survive. That's not something that requires apology. But it does require recognition. She looked around the observation deck, at the bodies and blood and evidence of violence that would shock the diplomatic corps to its core. At the proof that beneath civilization's careful rules, predators still hunted, prey still died, and children learned to kill or be killed. This stops, Shervara said. Not just for you. For all of them. Every child who's learned to sit still while predators circle. Every prey species that teaches their young to be invisible because visibility means death. This ends now. Your Majesty. Vel's voice was rough with pain, with shock, with the aftermath of violence. The diplomatic implications will be handled. Shervara kept her eyes on Maya. The Galactic Council operates on the assumption that all species have achieved civilization. That predator instincts have been controlled through law and culture and mutual benefit. Today proves that assumption is false. Some species still hunt. Still see others as prey. And they're careful enough to hide it behind diplomatic words and civilized behavior. She squeezed Maya's shoulder gently. Until they find someone vulnerable. Someone alone. Someone who can disappear without anyone powerful enough to care. Maya's eyes filled with tears. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Shervara to see the child beneath the survivor, the girl who'd spent 4 years being hunted, 4 years learning that civilization's rules only applied to those strong enough to enforce them. Your Majesty, Maya whispered. My father doesn't know about any of this. He thinks I'm safe. That humanity's alliance with the Galactic Council means we're protected. If he learns the truth, he will learn the truth. Shervara's voice was gentle but absolute. All of humanity will learn. All prey species will learn. And then, we will decide collectively whether the Galactic Council represents civilization or just provides cover for predators to hunt more efficiently. Security forces arrived finally, drawn by the sound of weapons fire and the silence that followed. They poured through doorways with weapons raised, ready to respond to threats, finding instead a massacre that made hardened soldiers pause in shock. Shirvara addressed them with royal authority, voice carrying across the blood-soaked observation deck. Secure this location. Detain all predator species currently in the building for questioning. No one leaves until we understand the full scope of this conspiracy. And someone get medical attention for Captain Vel. She looked down at Maya again. You're under royal protection now. Mine specifically. Which means anyone who hunts you hunts me. And I don't sit silent in back rows while predators circle. Maya Chen nodded slowly. Some of the emptiness left her eyes, replaced by something fragile and desperate. Hope, maybe, or the memory of what hope felt like. Ambassador Chen burst through the doorway moments later, his human face pale with shock, his eyes searching frantically until they found his daughter standing covered in blood that wasn't hers. He ran to her, grabbed her in a hug that made her flinch, pulled back immediately when he realized he was hurting her. Maya? What happened? Are you hurt? Did they? I'm okay, Dad. Maya's voice cracked finally, the professional calm breaking under the weight of her father's concern. I'm okay. The Queen, she helped me. Chen looked at Shirvara, at the blood on her hands, at the broken ribs visible even through her royal garments, at the bodies scattered across the floor, and the evidence of violence that could not be explained away or dismissed. Your Majesty, he said quietly, I don't understand. You will. Shirvara's voice was weary now, pain and exhaustion catching up with her. We all will. Your daughter has taught us an important lesson today about the difference between civilization and the appearance of civilization. She turned to address the growing crowd of security personnel and officials, her voice carrying the authority of 4 decades of rule. Contact all council members immediately. Emergency session, mandatory attendance. And arrest warrants for anyone who has had contact with the deceased predators in the last 30 days. We're going to find out how deep this conspiracy goes. Medical personnel arrived, moving to tend to the wounded. A medic approached Shirvara, portable scanner already reading her injuries, professional concern on their face. Your Majesty, you have 3 broken ribs, severe bruising, and possible internal bleeding. You need immediate treatment. After. Shirvara waved them away. After I've given my statement. After I've ensured the child's safety. After I've. Her legs folded. The adrenaline that had kept her standing failed all at once, shock and pain overwhelming royal dignity. Vel caught her before she hit the ground, his own injuries forgotten in the face of his queen's collapse. Your Majesty, he said urgently. Please. You've done enough. Shirvara looked at Maya one last time before consciousness began to slip. The girl was watching her with eyes that had seen too much, understood too much, survived too much. Eyes that finally showed something other than calculating awareness. Gratitude. Make sure she's safe. Shirvara whispered to Vel, whatever it takes. However long it takes. No more children hunting alone. Yes, Your Majesty. The world faded to black, but Shirvara went peacefully, knowing she'd done what queens were meant to do. Not sitting on thrones giving orders. Not hiding behind guards and protocol. But standing between predators and prey, between violence and innocence, between the galaxy that existed and the galaxy that should exist. She'd sat silent many times in her long rule, watching and waiting and calculating like Maya had learned to do. But today she'd stood up. Today she'd acted. Today she'd proven that civilization meant more than pretty words at diplomatic assemblies. It meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Even if you had to bleed to do it.